We start our journey by visiting a land that has captured our attention for the past 2 decades, Afghanistan. Today, it is a symbol of endless conflict and turmoil, a place where empires go to become ruined. But 8 centuries ago, it was part of a vast and thriving Persian empire, home to some of the world's greatest poets, scholars, and philosophers. We turn our attention first to the city of Ghazni, home to our first poet, Hakim Abul Majdud ibn Adam Sanai Ghaznavi, more commonly known as Sanai. Sanai was originally a royal poet, writing poems in the praise of the Sultan of Ghazni, which was an important center of Persian literature in the early 11th century. There's a wonderful story about how Sanai left his ordinary life to pursue his spiritual journey, and it goes something like this. One day, the Sultan of that time, Bahram Shah, decided to invade and conquer neighboring India. Sanai, as the official royal poet, was summoned to join the Sultan to extol his virtues and conquest. But as he was heading toward the court, he came across a walled garden that was home to a notorious drunk named Lai Khur. And as he was passing, Sanai heard Lai Khur raise a toast to the blindness of Bahram Shah for trying to invade India in a pointless expedition when there was so much beauty in Ghazni. This forced the poet to stop in his tracks, and not a moment later did Lai Khur raise another toast, this time to the blindness of the famous Sanai, who, with all his poetic and intellectual talents, couldn't see how meaningless his life was praising a blind and greedy sultan. According to Lai Khur, Sanai failed to see what God created him for, and that on the day of reckoning, all that he would ever be able to present to God are praises of kings and princes, nothing more. These words shook Sanai to his core, and he abandoned the life of a royal poet in favor of journeying on the Sufi path. He moved to Merv, in modern-day Turkmenistan, to pursue a life of spiritual perfection, before returning to Ghazni years later, living in retirement. Toward the end of his life, Sanai went on a pilgrimage to Mecca, and when he returned, he composed his magnum opus, Hadiqat al-Aqiqah, or the Walled Garden of Truth, passing away soon after it was completed. The title of his masterpiece has a double meaning, as the Farsi word bagh means both garden and paradise, but also because it is from within a walled garden that he heard such devastating words that caused him to transform his life. The Walled Garden of Truth is believed to be the first Persian mystical epic poem in Sufism, and is said to have left a lasting mark on other notable Sufi teachers and poets that followed, including Attar and Rumi. Rumi especially acknowledged Sanai and Attar as having a tremendous influence on his life and poetry, stating, "Attar was the soul, and Sanai its 2 eyes. We came from their path." Many of Sanai's teachings revolved around awakening and removing the worldly obstacles such as lust, greed, and emotional excitement that prevented one from achieving divine knowledge and experiencing the ultimate haqq, or truth. Similar to Hafiz after him, whom we met in episode 1, he criticized the formalities of religion and emphasized experiencing divine love firsthand as opposed to merely and blindly following faith-based rituals without any true sincerity or understanding at all. We now travel from 12th century central Persia to its northwestern reaches in the city of Naishapur. Back in episode 1, we met a prominent Sufi poet named Abu Sa'id Abul Khair, who lived in this ancient city located on the Silk Road and known for its pottery, carpets, and turquoise. On this episode, we meet another Sufi master and poet who called Naishapur their home and who greatly influenced countless Sufi poets after him. Born as Abu Hamid bin Abu Bakr Ibrahim, Attar was not just a Persian poet and Sufi, but also a hagiographer, or someone who writes literary narratives about holy people and saints. Similar to many other poets during this era, not much is known about Attar, and much of his life has been reduced to myths and legends. What we do know, however, is that he was the son of a prosperous pharmacist and received a strong education in medicine, Arabic, and theosophy. He worked at his father's pharmacy, helping prepare essential oils and herbal remedies. And when his father passed away, he took over his shop, often writing poetry while attending to his clients. In fact, his pen name Attar means apothecary, pharmacist, or perfumer in Farsi. It is through his profession that he came into regular contact with people from all walks of life with their daily struggles, which is believed to have affected him deeply. One narrative tells of a fakir, or Muslim ascetic, visiting Attar's shop one day and marveling at the opulence of his store. The fakir's astonishment made Attar uncomfortable, and he ordered the beggar to leave immediately. The fakir, indignant, then pointed at his ragged cloak and said, "I have no problem leaving with just this, but how are you planning to leave with all this?" he said, pointing at the store. This experience moved Attar immensely, and he eventually left his pharmacy and traveled across the Asian continent, meeting with many Sufi scholars who influenced him greatly before returning back home. When he returned, he reopened his pharmacy and began contributing to Sufi thought, starting with a prose work called Tadkirat al-Awliya, or the Memorial of the Saints, in which he compiled verses, sayings, and biographical accounts from previous Sufi poets and mystics, like Rabia and Mansur al-Hallaj. Many of these saints would have simply been forgotten in history had it not been for Attar's work. When I hear his story, I'm reminded of a young Siddhartha who centuries before was also exposed to the suffering of the people around him, before leaving the comfy palace life to become an ascetic and eventually return years later enlightened as the Buddha. Attar wrote both short lyric poems as well as longer epic poems, which contained highly symbolic stories conveying themes of enlightenment, oneness, union, separation, and divine love. His most famous work is Mantiq-ut-Tayr, or The Conference of the Birds, which is an epic spiritual poem containing thousands of verses that narrate the story of birds personifying humans who, with the guidance of the Hupu bird or their spiritual master, go on a quest in search of the legendary Simurgh bird, or God. They travel through 7 valleys, or stages in their spiritual journey, overcoming many personal obstacles along the way. Of the 200 birds that start the journey, only 30 end up successfully annihilating their ego to reach the home of the Simurgh. But when they arrive, they learn that the Simurgh is unfortunately not there, and that they, in fact, are the Simurgh themselves. Attar cleverly used wordplay to employ a double meaning, with the word si meaning 30 and murgh meaning bird in Farsi. All of which ultimately demonstrate the divine within each and every one of us. Many of Attar's teachings can be simplified to express that the soul, waiting for release from its bodily prison and reunion with Source in the afterlife, can actually experience this reunion in this present life through journeying inward and purifying their heart. He is said to have died a violent but memorable death, with the legend stating that when the Mongols invaded Naishapur in 1221, Attar was taken prisoner by a Mongol. When someone tried to ransom him with 1,000 pieces of silver, Attar advised the Mongol not to sell him at that price. The Mongol got excited, thinking he could earn even more money. Later, another person came offering just a sack of straw in exchange for Attar. The mystic told the Mongol to sell him for that price, for that it was all he was worth. Angered by this, the Mongol then beheaded Attar. The story itself is hard to verify, but it illustrates an important point. The body and individual self, or ego, is of little worth. What should be prized, and is priceless, is the divinity inside us, which can never be killed or destroyed. Though not relatively famous in his own time, Attar's popularity grew over the centuries, and he is said to have made an indelible impression on a young Rumi. Some sources say that the young boy, born when Attar was well in his 60s, actually met the elder mystic on his way to Konya, Turkey, with his family. Perhaps seeing the spiritual potential in him during this exchange, Attar gave Rumi one of his famous books, the Asrar-Nama, or Book of Secrets, which is said to have significantly shaped Rumi's own life philosophy and poetry.